What's going on? Happy Thursday, November 2nd. Hope you're doing well. We're going to kick it off officially in just a few minutes. Thank you for coming. For some of you folks being right on time, 2 o'clock Eastern. Greatly appreciate it. Let me see who's in this right now. We got a few different people. What's up, Katie, Julie? Oh, JK. Shout out to Audience Plus. We'll have Anthony up in just a second. I see Nick and Rachel, my two other amazing partners and guests for this webinar coming up. So let us know in the chat. Get that chat fired up. So we just had Halloween in, I guess it's not just the United States. Like a lot of the different parts of the world celebrate maybe Halloween. What is your favorite candy? So like that's a question to kind of break the ice. If you don't love that question, oh, Gobstoppers. That's an awesome one. Devin, what's up? Reese's Mini Cups. That's a good one. Okay, if you don't like that question, though, what is your next holiday for at least America's coming up is Thanksgiving. I know Canada just had their Thanksgiving. Like, what's your favorite, maybe not Thanksgiving food, but like, say, winter type food? Winter's coming up. And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you got summer coming up. So I'm trying to be all inclusive here, but it's tough, right? The world, how the way the world works. But yeah, what's your favorite maybe winter type food? If you don't like the Halloween question, eating a Kit Kat right now. Nick, who's my partner with Tack, he was just eating candy all day yesterday. That was his like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like he was literally on calls just eating candy. I'm actually gonna pull him onto the stage right now and give him a hard time about that. What's up, Nick? Oh, you're on mute. We can't. Oh, he's getting his candy. What is he? Oh, he still has it. See what I mean? Too much candy. Nick, is your audio good? Can we hear you? I just want to make sure you're good. We'll get started in I'm going to get started very soon because we only have an hour together and we really appreciate you all coming. Again, my name is Mark Hillins. I'm the CEO co-founder of Tack. If you haven't seen on the internets today, we launched something new called the Tack Network. And we have the two people who really helped bring this to life with us today. I'm so honored and thankful for both these companies, both these people. I will have them do some introductions in just 30 seconds. But I can't stress how thankful I am. If you want to check it out, it's tacknetwork.com. Today's topic is all about owned media and this movement that one of these folks created. And he's going to be my first guest. But before I do that, I want to bring everyone onto stage. Start with Anthony, and then bring Rachel onto the stage and have them both do a quick intro. Looks like Nick's coming back online. I think he had to reboot his computer. It happens. But Rachel and Anthony, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being amazing people and partners. Rachel, kick it off with an intro, please.
Oh, the pressure, man. Hey, everyone. My name is Rachel Downey. I started a company called Share Your Genius, and we are bullish on using podcasts to launch your media-led growth strategy. So super excited to be here today and share some insights, hopefully, with you all.
Awesome. Love it. Introduce myself really quick. Anthony Kennada, co-founder, CEO of Audience Plus, former marketer, CMO at a company called Gainsight for about 7 years, went on to Front and Hopin, and now transitioning to starting a business, which has been a lot of fun and crazy and all the good things. So excited to be here. And congrats, Mark and Nick, on launch day.
Oh, yeah, and Rachel, too. Rachel deserves a huge congrats. I mean, this whole network is powered by Share Your Genius. So I want to make sure that's explicitly clear. None of this could be possible without Rachel, her team. They're amazing. We're going to talk about that in her segment coming up. We're going to start with Anthony, though. So, Rachel, I'm going to take you off stage, and then you're up next. And then, Nick, hopefully your video comes back on. I feel bad for you, my friend. I know the technical stuff. It happens. But, Anthony, let's spend 10 minutes with you. We got a lot to unpack over the next 55 minutes. You're going to kick it off with the true power of this own media movement. Like, how did it come to be? How should people think about it? Let me pull up some of the visuals here because you got some great things to walk people through to get everyone to understand and just lay the foundation for the changes that are happening in kind of B2B go-to-market, but even broader than that.
Yeah, absolutely. So excited to do it. I think the heart of this I appreciate the language around this being a movement, I think is really stemmed from this feeling that we're all experiencing as marketers, where we're just unable to make the impact that we used to make. Like the playbooks that we all have been executing for the last almost 2 decades just don't work anymore. And when we think about, it's one thing for me to say this as a marketer, former operator, but when John Miller, the former co-founder of Marketo, says that the playbook that he helped create is no longer working, I think it's time for all of us to be paying attention to that. And so what changed? What have been sort of the elements that have contributed to making our jobs as marketers just so much harder than it used to be? First is that it is so noisy on the internet. Being able to actually get the attention of our audience is harder than it's ever been before. And a part of that is, when we think about how we're spending our calories as a content team, we're typically still writing SEO blog posts written for an algorithm to hopefully drive traffic, to maybe convert 1 or 2% of that traffic into request demos. I don't know if that resonates with anyone. And meanwhile, what's our audience doing? They're joining events like this one. They're listening to podcasts. They're watching videos. And that's the gap that's existing today in terms of our ability to actually get a hold of our audiences. Second is that paid distribution is extremely expensive. And this is the era of efficient growth that we are now kind of operating within. And when you look at marketing and paid media in general, typically it's the largest line item in the marketing budget. And we're getting into planning season now. That's where the red pen comes out. And your CFO or your FP&A kind of counterpart is typically looking at the paid media dollars that you're requesting and trying to bring that down into next year. Companies that are doing this really, really well are having a hard time finding incremental efficiency on their existing investments in paid. So overall, our relationship is sort of changing with that tactic. And speaking of relationships changing, if you've our relationship with social media is changing. If you don't believe me, try posting a Substack link on X. You can't do it. They actively suppress certain links on that platform, very unapologetic about it. But it's not just them. LinkedIn, the algorithm changes every 2 weeks and our organic reach is impacted. TikTok is on the verge of a national ban. And what we're realizing is that our reach into our own audience that has willfully followed us or requested to follow us is throttled by an algorithm that we don't control. So all of this, plus some upcoming kind of changes to data privacy laws around third-party cookies, are really leading companies to be building a first-party relationship with their audience, also known as an owned audience, a direct relationship with their audience, where the cost of distribution of our content, of our messaging, whatever, goes down to $0. So a lot of the learnings that we've been kind of taking and talking to a lot of customers and others have really come from the consumer media industry. They've faced similar headwinds years before, and have kind of come up with a pretty novel way of building a first-party data model about their audience, and then understanding how to monetize that data into revenue, which for their business, of course, is much different than ours in the B2B space. But the way they see the marketing funnel in the consumer world is so much different than the way we talk about it in B2B. They talk about the funnel through this lens of rented, owned, and monetized audience. Rented audience being anywhere where we don't have that direct first-party email relationship with our audience. And hear me when I say this, it's critical. You can't do owned media without a strong rented engagement strategy, without getting your podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, without getting your videos on YouTube. Like, those are critical. What's different is the intention. From a consumer media perspective, the intention of all of their rented engagement is to, using their language, deplatform that follower or that listener or that viewer into what they call a subscriber. And that language is pretty new to us. We've talked about like marketable database and conversions and those types of things, but being able to actually generate subscribers for your brand, what you typically see on the revenue marketing perspective is like a 5 to 10x improvement in conversion rate when you're leading with value. You're leading with education. You're leading with inspiration. You're not just trying to trick them into filling out a form to spam them or get your SDRs to call them. Like, that's all good somewhere in the funnel. But that's sort of the power of building a subscriber base, building a first-party owned audience. And what they do really well in the consumer world is use that data then to make decisions, production decisions from a content perspective, distribution decisions, but also looking for intent around who is in market for our products and services. And then they engage from a campaign perspective and they try to sell them a premium subscription or a course or whatever, event attendance. And for our purposes, enterprise, or for enterprise companies, a demo of your product. So all this to be said, the language that we're kind of wrapping around this movement is this idea of owned media. And we very much see this as, and Mark, would love to get your take really quickly here, but like as kind of the next generation of inbound marketing, a category that you have helped kind of create and fan the flames of and bring into the world. And it's really this movement away from just, and again, don't get me wrong, SEO content's good, like we need that, but just over indexing on written articles for an algorithm, and instead to think about editorial content formats like podcasting and others for humans. And instead of thinking about it just through the lens of traffic, we think about kind of how can we drive subscriptions on the other end of that engagement, where we're not just measuring all of that engagement now in an anonymous aggregate of views or listens or impressions, but actual first party data. And so we're building some software to help basically power that, much like the blog and the CMS has powered the first generation of content. I'm curious, Mark, again, learning so much from you over the years in this space, how you see kind of the sort of evolution of inbound marketing.
No, spot on. I completely agree with this. The way I see it is the internet has matured, and the plumbing of the internet has allowed us to become more personal or personalized, but I really think it's personal, Anthony, in the ways in which we represent ourselves online within this digital world. And that has then necessitated the need to go from what, inbound marketing was so good at for, a decade plus to something a little bit different now, because there's just new technology across the entire value chain of the internet that allows us and has created these new habits with us to expect different things and bring our like real authentic self, because now everyone on the internet can be a creator and can create what you have here on the right hand side. So that's my kind of overall point of view.
Love it. Yep, totally agree. Some of the companies that jump out to me that are kind of moving pretty quickly in this area, of course, Tack Network today being the star of the show. Some folks, others, that we've seen be kind of early movers, span kind of the company segment. They span across segments and ICPs. So on the earlier stage side, a company called Lavender, which I think many of you might have seen some of the great content coming out of Lavender. They are doing, I think, a phenomenal job of using video to create serialized content, but also to use their internal employees as quote unquote creators, where they're really championing the people at the company as the sort of embodiment of the brand as they're kind of going forward. Lavender has built an outsized kind of brand for the company size that they're currently at, and doing an amazing job kind of monetizing that into subscribers and customers. Counterintuitively, on the other end of the spectrum, Zuora is really leaning into this movement as well. They actually took what traditionally is referred to as the campaigns team within the demand gen team. I think everyone has maybe a different name for this. And he's rebranded them into audience marketing managers. And each AMM is responsible for a different segment that Zuora sells to. And the CMO has sort of given the charter that each AMM gets budget to produce shows to engage this audience and start building that sort of owned relationship around this content. And so we're seeing in the enterprise as well happening. It's not just an early stage kind of concept, which is really, really exciting. And so just to end here, thanks for giving me the opportunity to join you guys today and help celebrate kind of this kickoff. We produce a lot of content around owned media, so if you're interested in following along, check us out on audienceplus.com. It's all for free. And also, we just put together this content guide of sorts for people who are thinking about investing in owned media in 2024. We're in this planning cycle right now. And thank you, Mark, for putting the link into the chat. If you want help thinking through budget scenarios, through how do you hire, how do you build and justify the investment to your CEO or your CFO, we've put together kind of a detailed guide to work through to help set you up for success in getting the approval for owned media in 2024. So Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys having me be part of this, and looking forward to sticking around for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, Anthony, you'll be back in about 20, 30 minutes. And I just replaced the link in the chat, so the UTM tracking wasn't going to get screwed up. I accidentally included the UTM link in that. So trying to do that for you. But no, I love the perspective you have on this. Early days for me at HubSpot, when we were building HubSpot Academy, we came to realize pretty quickly the power of storytelling through video, right? Like, and educating through video. And this is like 2011, 2012. And I think so much has changed now because it's so much now easier, Anthony, to create video content.
Totally.
Right? Like, I remember like talking to Kyle and Steven, I think both of them are still at HubSpot, and they worked early days HubSpot Academy and whatnot. And it was just like, wait a minute, like, how do we do this in a way that's like easy but not too complicated? I mean, the iPhone did exist then, but I'm trying to remember, Anthony, like really quickly before we pull Rachel up onto the screen. And actually, I'm going to pull her up right now, and she can give her take on this too. Like, when did the iPhone become good to do video?
It has to be when the influencer like thing started happening, right? Because I feel like at least the next generation, everyone has created content like 2 feet from their face. And that's just become the norm from how we're experiencing content. And I can't think of a time before like Instagram and the whole influencer movement where that really was a thing.
I don't know. I remember back in like 2012, like shooting on my camera and uploading to YouTube. And I won't tell you the name of my blog, but I'm like, it was a thing, man. Like, I think that's the power of what we're talking about today, really, is like the power to create better quality has never been more ripe than it is now. And like, I'm calling this kind of like the grand experiment of media creation, because we can do such good quality work and anyone can be a creator. But if you have no strategy, if you have no outcomes attached to it, then it does just become noise in a vast kind of space, if you will.
Yeah, totally.
Well, on that note, we're going to pivot to Rachel's conversation now. And AK, we'll see you in a little bit.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you, AK. I hit the mute button. Sorry, let me take you off stage. Rachel, what's going on?
What's up?
How is the day going? It's fun times, right? I feel like we just it wasn't a marathon, it was a sprint to get this thing live. It was like Anthony and his team said we were the fastest to create the account in Audience Plus to take it live. I think it was like 12 days. You and your team are just incredible, number one.
Thank you. Well, I think that's kind of the point of almost like what we were just talking about. It's like we live in a digital age where you can create media products very quickly and rapidly. And obviously not all content is created equal, but I do think that this is a really good opportunity for brands to really understand the impact they can make with media, and understanding the definition between owned versus rented versus blah, 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 I think is essential as you start to create your plans for 24.
So I'm going to unpack a few things with you. Before I do that, though, I know you have a very strong point of view on the idea of content versus, say, storytelling or media. Like, can you just maybe like unpack your idea of like, what does content mean to you versus what isn't content? Like, I know you got a really good perspective on this.
Well, I hope it's good, because now I feel like I don't even know what I say half the time. I will say this, like, I think when we talk about inbound marketing and what that was and being a content marketing has changed over the last 10 years. I mean, it's changed over the last 30 days, frankly. And being a content marketer originally was, how do I create content that gets people to click, to go in, to do something that would drive traffic to my website? We're not really in that world anymore. The algorithms, the SEO plays, it doesn't land as well as it once did. And so I'm sort of in this phase of saying, like, the role of the content marketer is gone. That has changed. You now have to be a brand storyteller that can tell your own story of impact. And so what the difference is between a content marketer and a brand storyteller is, and I feel like Devin Reed will double click on this one or +1 it, we'll see. But the job of a brand storyteller is to create emotional connection between your audience and your brand and inspire and empower them to go do something. And that's what you have to do today to stand out and create something worth sharing.
Ooh, lot to unpack there. I love it. I would 80 to 90% agree with you 100%. And I want to get into how do you start that though? Like, because like to me, like, great, that sounds fantastic. Pull on the emotion, like the emotive side of marketing almost. But like, where does someone begin? And maybe you take it in two different angles, like a company that's like doesn't have a lot of resources. It doesn't matter if it's a tech startup or just, a company that's small who's just trying to figure out how to do this and diversify how they go to market, versus someone who has a lot of resources. Like, is it the same way you get started or is it different?
No, it's 100% the same way. And by the way, this is why I'm bullish on podcasting, because podcasting allows you to experiment and innovate faster than any other medium. And podcasting is both a channel and content. So you can grow a channel while leveraging the heck out of that content for repurposing purposes, blah, blah, blah. So just to say that, also the comments of 89% agree with you 100%. That is like, that needs to be a t-shirt. Okay. So going back to what you actually asked me though, I totally lost my train of thought on that. Sorry, Mark. But literally it's 4 steps. Yeah, it's 4 steps in my mind. It's outcomes. You focus on the outcome. What do you want to achieve? And I really distilled it down to one of 3 outcomes at any given time. And by the way, your outcomes should be driven by what your CEO has set as the strategic objectives for that year. That is the thing that you should be focusing on. And so there's one of 3 outcomes that you should be tying any of your strategies to, specifically when we're talking about media creation, video, podcast, blah, blah, blah. For me, it's brand, obviously. I want to add value, grow my brand, etc. Or no, I need revenue. So I need to build new relationships. I need to strengthen relationships. I got to drive that demand, baby. Or 3, it's recruiting and retention. Like, we need talent. We need people. We that's what we need. And so one of those 3 things is the larger priority for what you're doing. And so it's like, pick that. After you've got your outcome, you go to your audience. Who is this for? Like, who is this for? Nail that audience. And by the way, again, I think Anthony mentioned this. It's like, you can have multiple shows that serve multiple audiences. Like, that's completely fine. And one of the ways that I think about that from an audience perspective and how you develop content to serve an audience is a really simple way of thinking about it. It's like, do I have a general audience that I can serve specific content to? Or do I have a really specific audience that I can serve general content to? It's kind of like an easy framework for you to like make some bets on how you're going to tee this up. So you go from outcomes, audience, distribution strategy, and then show design. So that is the process that I would take.
Oh, we lost your audio. I think you're so maybe you got too excited. You unplug your mic by accident. It happens. I think it's coming back. Hold on. No, not yet. No audio. I mean, great framework. Let's see if she gets her audio back. Okay, she's back. Perfect.
Sorry about that. But that's exactly what I would do, is I would follow those 4 steps for every single media product that you are going to create.
So how do you though, like, let's go more specific. Give us like your top 3 tips when it comes to creating super engaging content, say video podcasts. Like, what are the 3 most important things
for creating compelling video podcasts?
Exactly. Let's just use that medium, that kind of format, whatever you want to call it.
So here's what I'm going to do that you're not going to like, because I don't like to give best practices, because best practices only work if they're right for you and the outcomes that you want to achieve. But I can tell you that there are some things that you should always consider if you're checking the box of, am I creating something that's quality? So number 1, if you're going to have a video podcast, you're going to want to have an intro that has some branding, obviously, that has some animation, that has some assets that make your brand look nice and clean. Do not just show up on the mic and ramble and hope that something great comes out. So this has nothing to do with creating something engaging in terms of what they see, but it has more to do with what you're planning before somebody records. Every single episode that we create with our clients is based on a content brief. Every single episode. And if you're not doing that, you're missing the boat because you're wasting your content team's time and you're wasting potentially your guest's time. The other thing that I would say is that your guest experience is more important than you probably are giving it credit for. If your guest has a phenomenal experience with your brand, because this is a brand activity, they're 100% more likely to share the fact that they were on your show, and they're 100% more likely to engage with your brand after they've been on your show. And so taking the time to think about that is essential. So video, if you're going to have video as part of your podcast, which you should, because it is like the number 3 way that people find podcasts is through YouTube. So you definitely want to have video. Take the time to create a nice animated intro with some branding and all that kind of stuff. Make sure you're doing the lower thirds, all that kind of stuff. Just do that. That's kind of like essential, check the box, obviously. Develop content briefs and spend time on that guest experience, because the number 1 way people find podcasts today, that has not changed in the 6 years since I started this company, which still is astounding to me. But the number 1 way people find your show is through word of mouth. So make sure it's worth sharing.
People first. People first. I love it. I love it. We got 3 minutes left until we bring Nick on to talk about distribution, promotion. Then we bring you, Anthony, and Nick all on together for a final wrap up. What about like this idea of building an audience first?
Like before you launch a show?
Before you maybe launch a product, a show, a brand, like what's your vibes on that?
What is my vibes on that? Okay, so here's the way I think about this. If you don't have an audience, if you don't yet have an audience, then I would say you want to do a rented audience strategy. But you have to make sure that you're driving them to go do something with you next. Does that make sense? So when I say rented strategy, I mean brand collabs, I mean co-marketing stuff. I mean, that's when you would do some paid advertising, things like that. That's when you join a network that you don't own, that kind of thing. So like you want to kind of like use other people's audience to help you grow your own. And you just need a landing pad for them to go to once they've engaged with you. If you already have an audience and you don't have a show and you don't have long form content that's your like programmatic thing that you're releasing on a consistent schedule, then you're missing a massive opportunity. Brand fans are hungry for brand funded content, and all of the stats support it. And one of the things I just read recently that kind of blew my mind is that this was just released by SiriusXM. 51% of people who stream audio, 51% would rather stream audio than consume social media. They want you on the go. And so you have got to think about your audio strategy as it relates to this world of media.
Some wisdom just dropped by Rachel. Wisdom. I love it. And by the way, you got some big fans. 100% agree with the guest experience is the brand experience. Showing guests that I give a shit and did my homework has paid dividends, says Ronnie. Look, like if you treat that as a transaction, I'm just bringing someone on. Thanks. Bye. Like, no good. That's either like, continuing to build the relationship you have with someone, or it's like the moment where the first impression matters so much, Rachel.
Yep, 1,000%. And the thing is, like, your show is an opportunity to nurture a relationship one-on-one and one-to-many. And so if a guest is part of your strategy and you're not maximizing it, then you're missing out on a massive opportunity to build those relationships that build your network, that build your net worth.
It's true. Let me see if Nick, are you good? Do you have your video on? I just want to make sure you're next. All right, he's got his video. I'm going to pull him up to the stage, Rachel. Because this is a good segue and transition into talking about like distribution. Because you mentioned like your guest can be a really helpful way to distribute the owned media, the content. Nick, you want to ask Rachel a question before you get the spotlight turned onto you?
Yeah, I'm just curious, on some, on like the owned media side, like what have you seen the best from like promotion strategies for owned media assets?
So video shorts, like crush it. Video shorts crush it. But the thing that you have to keep in mind is that the video short is just it's a bite. It's an appetizer. And you have to have something that's longer form and more compelling so that they can spend more time with your brand, because that is a metric that we should be tracking. That should be something that we care about. I love Anthony's funnel, how he talked about it, where it was like rented, owned, monetized. In our world, top of funnel is impressions. It's downloads. It's kind of like the things that show us that we indicated some type of reach. Middle of the funnel is time spent with brand, action taken by somebody by engaging with their other pieces of media on their channels, all the way to the conversion, which would be bottom of the funnel. And for us, that's completely aligned with what Anthony's talking about. It's subscribers. Like that's what you want to do. That's the whole point of why you're doing this. Short form videos crush it. And I know people are going crazy over them right now, and rightfully they should. They should be great, but they are the thing that is like the thing that hooks them to go spend more time with your brand, which is why you need a longer form media strategy to back it up.
Love that.
And I can tell you, like, this I found interesting. Mark, I'll share this and I'll shut up. Sorry. I got the mic, you gave it to me. But I'll just tell this really, really quickly. So how people find podcasts outside of word of mouth, the ways that people find podcasts, and these are just like the top 5: YouTube, searching on the internet, Facebook, Spotify, and a recommendation from another host. Those are the top 5 ways that people find podcast content. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that changes over time. But I think it's important for everybody to know, as you're thinking about your distribution strategy, or as you're thinking about audience growth and how you get more people aware of what you're doing, those are the places that people are finding your show.
You're muted, Mark. You're muted, Mark.
I'm on mute. Jeez. Dude, guys, way too much coffee. I can't focus well. I'm saying 89 to 100%, right? It's all the same. Rachel, thank you so much for so much wisdom in 16 minutes. You'll come back on with Anthony in 10 minutes. Nick's going to rip through some ways to think about distribution. I'm going to ask you some more pointed questions, Rachel. So you ready in 10 minutes?
Okay. We'll see.
Giddy up. All right. See you soon. All right, Nick, what's up, my friend? How much candy have you had today?
I actually haven't had any. This is my 3rd event that I've done of the day. So I'm hoping my voice holds up a little bit.
Why don't you start eating some right now? I wish I actually had some candy with me. It might not be good for the, articulation of what you're saying, but maybe, one of those Tootsie Roll Pops. That's one of my favorite pieces of candy.
They are good.
I've had way too much coffee today, as you can tell. I was not even paying attention. My mic's muted. What are you going to do? So you've been creating content for a long time. You've had how many podcasts, have you had in the last 5 years?
I've had 4 over the last 4 years. And so I actually just launched my 5th one today, Creators Gonna Create, which is all about the creator economy and B2B. So shout out to Rachel and Share Your Genius, because they are producing everything. Launched on Audience Plus today. First, the trailer plus the first episode. But we're going to be doing that one big. So
how are you going to distribute that? Look, you already have an audience, so you're in a slightly envious position for sure. But when you're even growing your audience, so maybe you want to take a step back first. But how should people think about distribution? Rachel was saying, of course, the appetizer of the short clip. I like that. That's nice. But there's got to be other ways. What else do you recommend?
Yeah, I think it's things where it's like content amplification. How can I repurpose this content into different formats for different platforms? Because what hits, so I post on pretty much every platform. So I'm on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, X, and I'm repurposing all different types of assets here. It's actually it's crazy how much of a full-time job that can be for someone if you don't have a team behind you that does a lot of those things for you. But how can you amplify that content? Because my audience that I have on, and again, this is rented obviously, but the audience that I have on TikTok and Instagram and even YouTube is completely different than what it is on LinkedIn. My X audience is completely different. There's a little overlap, but it's all different people. And plus, with the demise of LinkedIn and no one seeing my stuff now for weeks, I used to drive 1 million impressions a month on my content on LinkedIn. I'm lucky to drive 125,000 now if I'm lucky. And it goes to show that like, hey, you're going to have to rely on different types of strategies to amplify that content. I'm also a huge believer, obviously, like teaming up with creators, influencers. I'm writing a book on this right now. I have a newsletter about it, have the new podcast about it. I am willing to bet my career that influencers and creators in B2B are the future. And I think when you're collaborating, and I mean, we've done this before, Mark, we talked about, you have an art studio, and within that art studio, all these creators come and you're collaborating on different types of content, assets, and you're taking that art that you create in the art studio and you're going on a road show to basically tour your art, which is your creations. And whether that's in offices, in art gallery, whatever, that's how you're distributing all that. And a beauty, and again, maybe it's the failed marketer in me that I've done so many events. I'm also a huge believer of events driving a lot of that distribution as well. When Mark and I, we worked at Air Meet together, and I ran the events team there. I mean, we ran a series called Eventions, and I was the host of that. Mark was the host of another series called Power Hour, and we leaned into both of us having audiences. We did about 30 events per quarter, and all virtual. And we relied on the distribution of the clips from that, turning one piece of a webinar into a blog post, into paid media, into stuff for SEO. Like, there's so many additional things that you can do there.
Yeah, and it all starts with your own media strategy. And I think if I had to summarize everything you just said into one word, diversification. So there's that. And then diversification with understanding the audience nuance between the format and the ways you would talk about your creations, your content on X versus YouTube versus whatever else. I'll leave you and the three others. You already know these three other D's that I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with these 4 words that start with D. The other stuff that you talked about, that Rachel has talked about today, and Anthony, and maybe when we all bring them back up in a few minutes, we'll all talk about these. But diversification is one. But then one of the most important ones is differentiation. Mm-hmm. The other one we talked about is distribution. That's a third one. And then the fourth is defensibility. And I think with owned media, you can get almost all 4 of those nailed down. Inbound marketing. Look, I love inbound marketing. Look, I've literally was like the person who shouted from the rooftops, taught, I don't know how many people through just the amazing team at HubSpot Academy. Like, this is how you should do inbound marketing. This is why this is the new approach. But look, like, was inbound marketing super defensible? If you got a head start, probably. I mean, HubSpot's the golden, example of that. Defensible SEO position, sure. But I think over time, when you look at the defensibility of different go-to-market strategies, that is one thing you really got to consider. And also, is it going to provide you a distribution leverage, a distribution advantage? So I don't know. Is there anything that comes to mind as I share those things with the audience? And we'll pull Rachel and Anthony up in a minute here. But anything else that comes to mind in terms of maximizing the potential reach of all this?
Well, I think it's important to think of like the role of owned media in a comprehensive marketing strategy, because, one of the questions that we asked on like the registration form was like, hey, is owned media part of your, your strategy moving forward? And I think it was like 85% or even closer to 90% said yes. And I think while owned media is a powerful tool for enhancing your people first go to market, it's essential still to integrate it within your larger marketing strategy, which obviously includes paid and earned media. But I think you need a balanced approach here that's reaching your target audience where they want to be through multiple channels, multiple touch points that they prefer, because it all adds up to a maximum chance of success. So it's like you might use paid media, maybe it's advertising, maybe it's a newsletter sponsorship that's going to drive the initial awareness and traffic to your own properties. From there, it's all about how do you engage owned media content that can help nurture your leads, build trust, convert those visitors into customers. Basically, on the other side, like earned media, positive reviews, press coverage, social media message, those going to further amplify your reach and credibility. So I think the balance of paid and owned media, it's important to always bring your perspective back to the most important part of marketing, which is the people who are listening.
I love this. I'm going to bring up Rachel and Anthony on the stage. And as I do that, I'm just going to say owned media to some degree is almost like the tip of the spear for a lot of what you can do to surround the customers, the buyers, with things that are going to help you build trust ultimately, which is the ultimate goal of everything you do is to build trust and that reputation. So yeah, I mean, Rachel, I'll start with you. Anything that comes to mind based off what Nick and I just chatted about?
I think a couple things that are really important. With Nick specifically, and your point of view in the marketplace around creators, like I think the brands that empower their employees to create are going to be set up to be more successful in the long term because they're going to have maximum distribution because they're going to have a ton of owned media products. Now, the definition of owned we can debate when it comes to other people creating, but you get the idea. And so I think that that's something that people should really be leaning into. We work with a company now that they have set aside like personal development dollars, and they can use those personal development dollars towards production. And so it's like they're supporting their company from that perspective too. And so I think that that's an interesting way to empower creators in your company to create for the company as a way to help grow the brand and grow the audience.
So it's interesting take. What do you think, Anthony? Like, what? Agree, disagree, somewhere in the middle?
No, I agree. I mean, I think owned media in general is a means to a bigger end. And I think the bigger end that you're talking about, Mark, there is trust, is building affinity between a institution of a business and a human being on the other side of it. And it turns out the human being also the same human being that watches movies to laugh or plays with their children, whatever, is the same human being that buys software. And that's been something that for whatever reason we've kind of not ignored, but it's been less emphasized, that sort of emotional context that goes behind purchasing decisions in B2B and how important trust is at the center of that. So we often talk about it's just such an exciting time to be a marketer right now because we're kind of reinventing our practice around that idea. And this is where marketing can help, because I think if all of us were able to take our founder or CEO, put them in front of every customer at all time, like every prospect, put them on a stage, get them behind a mic, whatever, that's ultimately the best way for us to build trust. But they can't do that because of limitations of time and space and travel. So that's where marketing kicks in. And we have a chance to take this story, take the people behind our company, take the folks in our ecosystem, these creators, that are amplifying the same story, and create content around those narratives delivered by people who are trusted in order to build and affirm trust. So that's why I think it's like, this isn't just something that feels good and is fun and is kind of like a creative expression. It's actually fundamental to driving revenue in this next chapter. And that's what makes it an exciting time.
Well, let's get to that right now, because let's get to the brass tacks. Because look, I was a CMO, a VP of marketing twice. I know what people are thinking, especially today. Show me the money. Yeah. And so how do you measure this stuff? Like, how do you actually convince your CEO, your CFO, CRO, CMO, because there's CRO, right? Because if you think about CAC, it's marketing and sales budget combined. Yeah. And they're like, wait a minute, you're spending how much money on this owned media strategy? And there's no way to measure it. There's no way to tie this down to revenue. And look, measurement is getting harder, as we all know. Cookies are going away. Apple's blocking everything. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to start with you, Anthony, and then Rachel, go to you, and then Nick, because I think we should all give our perspective on this.
Yep.
How should you measure it today? And then how could you measure it potentially in the future?
Well, let me start with a disclaimer first. Like, you cannot do owned media without rented. Like, it just won't happen. Like, you can't just like shout into a void. You have to be where your audience is, create incredible content, use the short form clips, all of the things that Rachel's talking about, I fundamentally agree with and believe is true. But I think that the challenge that we've found in B2B, and I found this as I'm talking to a lot of folks, carrying this every company's coming a media company flag, is like, we've heard this for years. Like, this has been a thing people have been talking about. What's new about it this time? And my answer to that is the data. That's been the missing piece, because when we've been solely beholden on distribution, again, it's important and critical, and the only way this can work is with that distribution. But when we're only doing it on YouTube or only doing it on Spotify or these places, The challenge is we get anonymous aggregates of engagement, 50 listeners, 500 views, and that's all good and helpful, and it helps us make some production decisions, some editorial kind of guidance, but oftentimes difficult to then tie that to pipeline or tie it to an ABM initiative or a customer who's at risk of churn, those types of things. And so I find that you might have 37 listens of a podcast on Spotify, but they might be the right 37 people that you want to get in front of. And we just haven't been able to have a great answer around that. And so what I think Own does, actually frames up a conversation with your CFO, with your CEO to say, what matters in this new context is now we have first party data. Now we have subscribers. And as we have that context built out, using rented distribution to pull eyeballs, pull traffic, pull folks from these networks into our own kind of environment, we can look at individual level analytics or account level analytics. Think about what Substack sees on the back. If any of you have operated a Substack newsletter, that's a window into the future of marketing automation. Think about what Netflix must have on the back end of my profile, right? 90s sitcom fan, sports documentary, like all of these types of things. That's the potential for this. And in so doing, we're not just able to make better production decisions using first party data, not just better distribution decisions. It's Spotify or it's Apple Podcast or it's actually LinkedIn, whatever it is. We're able to tie all of this engagement to revenue because we have that individual and account level context that isn't inferred. It's known. So that's where I think that this is going to be really, really exciting. And it fits within the broader strategy. Again, like it won't work unless we're figuring out distribution on Spotify and these other channels. But once we're able to build that subscriber, everything changes in terms of our ability to measure this impact.
Makes sense. What do you think, Rachel?
Well, I think I like what you're saying, Anthony. I think it makes a ton of sense, but I also think like that you shouldn't have to make the case for owned media to have a positive ROI, because it's bigger than just creating a podcast or a video series or whatever. It's fueling like all of your other content channels with a consistent brand message. And that is something that leadership is looking for. They don't want market confusion. They want a consistent brand message going out to the marketplace. They want their channels flooded with relevant content that's driving engagement and conversation. So it's like, what do you want? If you want a ROI, like 1=1 or 1=3 or whatever that is, then just execute an ABM strategy and call it a day. But like the media is that's not the story that you should be having to sell. And I also think fundamentally, if you're a founder or a CEO and you don't have a podcast or a video show or something like that, then you are missing the boat. Like you have to. Like people cannot trust you if they don't know you. And if they don't know you, like the only way they know you is if they hear you, if they see you. Like anyway, so like I can like go on a rant on that, but like the conversation on ROI with owned media like makes me roll my eyes, because I'm like, you go measure it on advertising, go measure it with the earned, do all that kind of stuff. The owned media is your opportunity to like get your brand out into the marketplace. Like, wow.
Yeah, I think one thing to consider is in this economy, if we can't add some type of ROI to a project, to an initiative, it's very hard to get it funded. And I'm not suggesting anything you're saying is wrong. I totally agree. But we are in like tough times from a marketing and CFO relationship. And these are the types of conversations that are being had. And so it's not to suggest, again, that of course you have to create a professional brand. People buy from people. You have to be out there. But there's a lot of skepticism on the finance side to approve a lot of these things unless we're able to tie it to value. And I think that's where it's sort of an opportunity for us as marketers to get investment on that very thing that we want to get investment for, but to show a path to revenue, show a path to attribution that is differentiated and it's new. And I think that's where we're seeing appetite for this, because it turns out this isn't that expensive relative to what we're already spending on paid or some of these other kind of traditional channels. So it's a pretty efficient thing if we can kind of communicate that value the right way. And that gives us the best chance, I think, to get these projects approved.
I think there's a couple of things though there that we have to think about. When it comes to owned media, it's not a 6-month or even 12-month return. And so it's like a brand has to buy into the long-term vision of this being valuable for them. So that's like one thing that I think has to be stated. The other thing that I don't think a lot of people pay enough attention to is that when you're standing up media, let's say that, like media, you're able to use that as part of your sales enablement. You're able to use that as part of an opportunity to talk to the people that are using your product. So for product innovation, you're already talking to customers if you're like doing anything. And so it's like, why not just record it? Don't even like worry about paying for all this other stuff, but like just leverage what you're already doing to help like start creating consistent brand messaging out in the marketplace. So it's like, I think we have this tension that's happening in the marketplace where like everyone's like, the content you create has to be Oscar worthy. It doesn't, not yet. It's okay. Sometimes it's just creating content that sparks conversation, sharpens a point of view, and then you can leverage and distribute it across other channels. And so that's where I get like heartburn around this ROI, where it's like it's not happening overnight. Now, again, I had a client who launched their show, episode 1. They launched their podcast. Within 30 days of that episode 1 launching, they closed a 6-figure deal. And I was like, what happened? And they were like, well, we sent the episode to somebody who had gone cold. And the segment that was designed on that show was like a consultant type vibe. And they were like, by listening to the consultant do their thing, we realized that we needed you. So it's like, there are these like wins that happen, but you have to start somewhere, and you're not going to have an ROI in 30 days.
I love this. So we're going to do a second webinar on this because it's kind of related to, Nick, what you said. I think there's a whole strategy that we can co-create with you folks listening around the idea of how to take own media and integrate it into the fabric of all of your go-to-market. And some of that can be directly measured. Some of it isn't. But like I see a comment on enablement. I agree. And like marketers not doing enough marketing of themselves internally and showing successes. Like, hey, here's 3 customer journeys. And look, three customer journeys. Here's where own media played a role in turning that customer or turning that prospect into a customer and turning that customer into an advocate. And like the data won't show it sometimes unless you just like look a little bit deeper. And you won't get to that level of depthness unless you think about how do you take the actual strategy and put it into the fabric of your go-to-market, which is not just marketing, but on the sales side, the customer success side, and maybe even the product side. So that's a whole interesting thing I think that the 4 of us can collaborate on with all of you listening if you want to participate in it. Nick, we have a few minutes left. Again, you've done a lot, 4 podcasts, 4 years. Own media is part like content, events, it's both those things. Let's talk just quickly about events for a second, because you and I both believe in this idea of event intent. And like today, this is an online event. It's a live online event. We've actually gathered some intent data during this event. Like, what's your take on own media as it relates to measuring it through the kind of event experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that's definitely possible. I mean, when I think of events that I have done, so I was doing a creator retreat in Costa Rica and bringing 20 of the best creators around, and the whole event was around intent and just being able to capture all of that information and go back. And it was sponsored by some of the biggest brands around. Another piece that I think of, so my previous podcast, I had a lot of listeners that would listen to it, and it drove 6 figures of sponsorship revenue. Companies like Google was sponsoring it, and we were able to turn that into events that drove a ton of intent about the specific type of webinar that it was as well, in podcasts. So I think it all plays into the larger intent strategy. But again, you can't think of it as an afterthought. It has to be at the forefront of your entire strategy.
Yeah. And that's this idea of integrated, right? Like, how do you integrate these things together and educate your CEO, CFO around the 1 + 1 equals not this 3, but 5 story, right? I've talked a lot about this idea of cornerstone assets, and own media have done right. These things become cornerstone assets, and they create this solar system effect, right? You have the sun, right? For example, Rachel, your show, right? It could become the sun that all these planets get pulled around, that each have their own moons. And, the moons are this snackable appetizer type content. the planets might be these things like you were just saying, the events, but they all stem from this one identity of this show, Voicemails with Rachel, right? So to me, it's thinking about it less as a one-off thing, and how do you use it, like I was just saying, for marketing, sales, CS, etc. All right, we're at time though. This has been I don't know, a lot of fun. I'll say that much. What do you folks think?
Great.
Definitely a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, a lot of golden nuggets, as I call them. A lot of like inspirational wisdom, actionable takeaways. Someone's going to pay for something. I paid for that. Maybe the integrated revenue thing. Interesting with own media. Content-based networking, narrowbound partner GTM is all human relationship management, says Chris, to create win-win as quickly as possible. I've got some. Oh, sorry, Anthony, you're blowing up the chat. Love this. Here we go. The Tack Media solar system diagram. Ship it. I'll ship it. I'll get my whiteboard out. It's right over there. I'll draw it and ship it. Definitely do an encore. I cannot thank Rachel and Share Your Genius enough about helping with not just like launch the Tack Network. Rachel and her team and Nick and I, we're in it for the long haul. Like our moonshot is 1 million subscribers. So look, if you're listening and you can help us get 1 million subscribers and help us make a big impact on people's lives, because that's why Rachel, Nick, and I, and I'm sure Anthony, we're all doing this, right? We're all about like, how do we help change the trajectory of someone's life through fun, educational, people first, authentic stories. That's the reason I did everything at HubSpot. I get choked up about all the stuff that was shared with me from the HubSpot community way back when about like how that helped people like change their life, grow their business, help their family. That's the reason we're doing this stuff. So we appreciate you listening. Come along with the journey. Thank you again to Rachel for everything. Anthony, your team and company has been incredible. Check out Audience Plus. Love it, love it, love it. And Nick, we're doing it, my man. We're just doing it. So thank you.
Onward and upward.
All right, everyone. We'll have an encore. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.